All right, so this is going to be another comic review, and this is from my good friend Chris. Thank you as always, brother. And today we're going to be talking about Dick Tracy Volume 3. This is from the continuation of the Mad Cave Dick Tracy run, which I've been really liking. It's a solid comic series. I've done Volumes 1 and 2 already on here, and yeah. So this basically this is what I like about this series is that each story arc feels pretty self-contained with loose plot lines that kind of follow along. This is also written by Alex Segura, who I have talked about before. He's kind of been my go-to pick for Daredevil. He has been basically, the guy I have wanted to be the Daredevil writer. No disrespect to Stephanie Phillips, but reading this and also like his Daredevil novel, I was like, Alex Segura needs to do a Daredevil run at some point. Anyway, so this storyline, I gotta be honest, I think it might be the weakest one we've had. This might, despite all the praise I've given, and I've really liked the first two volumes. My biggest issue is that Volume 3 is so far the weakest one. Now, that's not to say, oh, it's awful, it sucks, I don't want to read it anymore. There are things I liked about the comic, but there are, and hopefully, and it does feel like Volume 4, what we're building towards with Volume 4 could actually be really cool, so yeah. But if I was to compare, Volume 3 is probably the weakest, of the series so far. And that's probably because it does too much with not a lot of payoff. It does all these different plot lines and all these different storylines, and it just kind of feels like it doesn't work. Like, that's my thing, is that it doesn't feel like none of it's really like gelling. Like, none of it is really like working. So the storyline for this one is that Dick Tracy is on the case of a pair of bank robbers called the Summer Sisters. And the Summer Sisters are working for an unknown force. They're working for some unknown gangster who's in Germany. This also coincides with the fact that one of Tracy's old war buddies, Carl Klein, is here in America, and he's on the hunt for a spy. But, however, Carl is seemingly killed, and Carl and Trace, his girlfriend, go out to find them. And on top of that, his partner Pat, has been shot and left near death. While that's going on, a detective in the police force, Sam Ketchum, is on the trail of the Summer Sisters, trying to figure out who's also behind this. This all ties in with a lot of Nazi gold and a new villain called the Brow. This does have a lot of storylines with a lot of what happened in Volume 1, and this also kind of ties up some stuff from Volume 1. We get the return of some villains, and we also talk about like post-war stuff, and we delve a little more into Tracy's time during the wars, during World War II. So so that's what I like about this is that this is a more darker series, but it's not like they're trying to make it like Dick Tracy Max. Like, it's not trying to be like a Punisher Max book. There is swearing and there is violence, but the violence never gets like too gratuitous or the comic doesn't get overtly sexual. Yeah, Trace and Dick get it on, but it's done artfully. It's done very tastefully. The violence, while it is brutal at points, it's also not completely overt. So that's what I've really liked about this series. Now, like I said, and the Summer Sisters are fun, and I like the idea of Dick Tracy going on like a pulpy adventure in Germany. Though we don't really talk about like post-war Germany in the 1950s because, well, there was a lot going on that time. Anyway, so the things I don't like about it is, one of the major things is you kind of figure out the plot real fast. Like, the moment I started reading this book, I was like, so I know who the spy is. Furthermore, I feel like we could have just done a story with the Summer Sisters. I know we were going to pick up with like the likes of Pruneface and all these other villains, but it feels ham-fisted in there. Like, again, I feel like we could have just done a story with the Summer Sisters, and that's what it built up to. But it was more about Sam Ketchum, who is a ancillary, who is more of a supporting character, which is cool that like Sam gets stuff to do. But like at the same time, I'm like, I feel like the story could have just focused on Dick trying to chase the Summer Sisters and how that would tie in with with Pat's whole thing without going to Germany, because I feel like we just end up going back to Tracy's home city anyway with the sole answer of we know who the spy is, but you kind of put it together really fast. I also feel like Dick Tracy's PTSD, it doesn't really get explored properly in here. Like it's just flashbacks here and there, and that's really it. Yeah. And like I said, this is more build up to what's going to happen in Volume 4, which does look really cool because we're going back to like, Big Boy Caprice, who's going to be, trying to take over the city again. So, yeah. But really, like, I feel like we do too much with too little. Even this new villain called the Brow they introduce doesn't feel like a credible threat. This is a 5-part comic, and the Brow doesn't show up until the end of part 3. And he's revealed to be just a henchman for Pruneface, and that's really it. Like that's really, and then he doesn't like they build up this new villain right here, the Brow, right here. But he's not the main villain. He's just another henchman. He's a go-between. And he doesn't feel like a credible threat to begin with. Anyway, the Summer Sisters felt more like, why did the Summer Sisters need to be like underlings for the Brow, who was in turn just another guy for Pruneface? Yeah. That was really it. Now, the other thing I just kind of really want to talk about real quick is the fact that, like, next year, Dick Tracy is going to be public domain. And I'm curious how this is going to affect those like the Mad Cave comics, with a character now in the public domain, and anyone can write a Dick Tracy book. So, yeah, they won't even have the exclusive comic rights. And, yeah. Anyway, so I'm curious if they're going to continue with the series, or if they're going to be like, well, it's public domain, anyone can make a Dick Tracy book now, or use Dick Tracy entirely, so what's the point? So I'm curious to see what they'll do after this year. Anyway, it's not bad, it's not terrible, but this is definitely the weakest of the 3 volumes I've read so far, and that's not a bad thing to say, honestly. It still has a lot of good in it, and like I said, Volume 4 looks like it's going to be fun. But you guys tell me in the comments below if you have been keeping up with Mad Cave's Dick Tracy comics. Let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of it. Other than that, I hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.